Okay, so today we are going to discuss introduction to intercultural communication. So this is very important to our business communication, very important and vital part. While we are going to learn through this, first of all, we are going to learn about what is the culture and how it's going to affect our communication styles. And also then we are going to talk about under this the definition and the importance of intercultural communication. And meanwhile, we are going to learn about the intercultural communication and also cross-cultural communication difference, right? And we are going to analyze some of the barriers that we may face in business communication. Finally, we are going to develop some of the strategies and improve our communication in diverse work environment. So let's start our session, today's session. So first we'll understand what is culture and what are the dimensions. Okay, so what do you mean by culture? So when you're going to talk about culture, you have to talk about the definition and elements. So culture, it can be within a social group or a society. They may have some shared values, beliefs, and norms and practices. So within these groups and societies, so we can see the key elements like language and their religion, differences in religion, and their food items that they use, and their social roles. And within these social cultural groups and societies, they have their own family structures. So we consider all this language, religion, food, society roles, and family structures as elements of these cultures. Okay, so we have to understand the role of culture, how it's going to shape the communication. So we have learned about verbal and non-verbal communication. We are going to witness how these non-verbal and verbal communication are going to affect the culture. And you have to understand that different cultures interpret, sometimes they interpret the same actions or words, but in different ways. So one example is this thumbs up. So it's generally considered as a positive sign, agreement or a satisfaction or approval within the European cultures, right? But when it comes to the Arabian and Asian Islamic countries, they consider it as sometimes an insult, and they can be considered as offense. Okay, so when we are going to talk about the culture, it's very important. There are some key important concepts and ideologies we have to learn. Then we will get an overall idea about what this culture consists of. So we are going to talk about the first concept, which was introduced by Hofstadter's six cultural dimensions. So you can see in this picture, these are the six cultural dimensions that Hofstadter had already found, right? He has identified within the culture. These are kind of factor analysis. Okay, so he has found the power distance and collectivism versus individualism. He has observed all these each factor within the culture. Uncertainty avoidance index and femininity masculinity, long-term orientation, and also resistance versus indulgence. So you can see these set of groups within the culture itself. So let's talk about this each dimension in details to get a wide idea about what are these factors actually mean. Okay, so the power distance, it talks about the degree to the society or an organization accepts or expect unequal power distribution. Okay, so Hofstadter's definition, so he considered that the less powerful members of institution organization within the country accept or expect the power is distributed unequally. So it can be determined, this the significance of this power distance is that it determines the workplace hierarchy and social status gaps. Okay, so we have learned some of the organization, they always have strict rigid rules, but some of them they don't have such kind of rigid rules, and they always listen to their employees. So just like that, this power distance can be categorized into two sections. So we are going to factor analysis, how this power distance, higher power distance and the lower power distance. Okay, so high power distance societies always the centralized at the top. Power is there. That means they are very authoritative. They only take the decisions and they are the leaders, and they never go for the subordinates or employees' ideas, right? So these status differences are very visible and respected. And because of this respect and all, the subordinate, or we can call employees, they rarely ask questions or they challenge the authority. Okay. And so you can see these high power distance societies, they have very rigid uh, and they can be very rigid, strict rules are there in organizations. And when we consider about the low power distance societies, it's evenly distributed, right? So the relationships are more egalitarian. Egalitarian means social equality. They always go for social equality and always get the employees participant in decision making, and they do not much care about the formal hierarchy or the status differences. Okay, so because of this state, they do not care about the status differences and all. The employees feel very comfortable when they can ask whenever they want. They can ask questions and they can contribute their ideas also to the decision making. Okay, so let's move on to the examples where we can see this high power distance and low power distance. So the countries like um, Mexico, India, China, they always go for hierarchical structures. So always employees are expected to follow what the authority says. Okay. And always manager is the person who is takes decision, and they never go for the consulting ideas of these subordinates. Okay. And the low power, you can see this low power distance in Denmark, Sweden, and New Zealand countries, where the power is more equally distributed, and employees often expected to be consulted and included in the decision making process. Okay, so that's the difference between this high power distance and low power distance. Okay, so the second one is individualism versus collectivism. So you can see always this is kind of factor analysis. So this Hostites has distributed these six dimension depending on these factor analysis. So the second one is going to focus on individualism versus collectivism. So all this individualism, collectivism, it talks about the degree of interdependence, right? Interdependence on individual interest or interdependence on group loyalty. So if it's going to be based on individual interests, preferences, then we call it's that culture is mostly based on individualism, right? And when it goes for the collectivism, always go for the group loyalty, group team spirit, teamwork. So in the business world also, we see this dimension in the business world. Okay, so if we are going to analyze individualism, people act as individual. So personal interest, and they are very personal based interest are preferred, and they also always go for the personal rights and individual achievements. and also they encourage a self reliance and competition. So as we discussed earlier, the power distance, mainly the power distance type of power distance focused on this individualism, is low power distance. Okay. So the collectivism always strongly believe in group workplace, group community. So because of that, they go for the loyalty, group harmony, and they go for the collective goals over personal interest. So the interdependence is there, and also mutual accommodation, and it can be either way in between in groups or out groups. So what we can observe here is how studies had already identified this collectivism always promotes the high power distance societies. So what we have discussed, I have summarized here. If it's going to be if it's going to be individualist culture, then always the connection we have is low power distance. If it's going to be collectivist culture, then it's going to be high power distance. Okay, so the example what we can see is most of the, United States and Australia, they have the personal freedom and interdependence. They value it very much. So because of that, the workplace, all these things often, the individual success are often celebrated and awarded. And also, countries like India, Japan, China, they always go for the uh, work as a team, right? So the well-being of the group is prioritized rather than the individual desires. So you can see in this business world how this individualism and collectivism uh, goes into this cultural dimension, supports this individualism and collectivism. And the third one is uncertainty avoidance. Okay, in this, this Hofstadter is trying to highlight a society feels, or the group or society feels threatened by uncertainty and ambiguity. So we have these kind of cultures. So we can also in this, if we analyze this factor, uncertainty, we have high uncertainty avoidance societies and also low uncertainty avoidance societies. So you can see the high uncertainty avoidance societies. These are the key characteristics they have. Always they prefer stability and predictability. Risk averse is there, and always they go for the long term planning, because and also because of that they have very set strict rules, and they have a plan also to minimize anxieties. Always they create the protective barriers. And the next one is low uncertainty avoidance societies. So these uncertainty avoidance societies, they are low level. So they are comfortable with ambiguity and change. So they can resist in these kind of uh, cultural situations, right? So more adaptable, they are more adaptable, open to different opinions, and they are always they can accept the unstructured unpredictable situation, not like very structured societies, right? So they can always get adapt, grow, and learn something out of it, and they just adapt themselves and grow. Okay, so the examples, high uncertainty avoidance is there in Greece and Portugal. Okay, so they have very strong preference to ruled and structured situation, whereas we see Hong Kong, Singapore, they are very, people are very comfortable with uncertainty and ambiguity. So workplace is more often flexible. So there is a greater willingness to take risks like there. Okay. So they always, their business strategies in these countries may evolve because of this situation. Okay, next, masculinity and femininity. So this is one of the most important of studies cultural dimension where we always talk about. So we talk about femininity and what women can do, and we talk about the male role. So based on that, the culture can be divided, right? So we consider masculine societies, they have these kind of key features. So always this masculine society, they prioritize achievement, they always go for success, and always there's a competition, and also value authority, ambition, okay, assertiveness. That means they are very materialistic position. They go behind the materialistic positions. And also, individuals or groups, they are very motivated to cover up clear targets and measurable accomplishments. And they display wealth and success is socially accepted and always goal oriented, and they go for performance and recognition. So this is totally different from the feminine societies where they always consider about the quality of time, life, quality of life and relationship and caring and well-being, and value, always value equality. So that's why we talk about feminine rights and all those stuff, right? And the work life balance, they have to balance their work and life, okay, and they are always flexible and prioritize caring for the weak, preserving environment, social welfare, and also collaboration are encouraged in workplace. Both men and women are expected to be nurturing and cooperative. That's what the feminine societies they believe. So you can see, if we are going to categorize the masculine culture and feminine culture, these are the key contrast you can see, which is most visible. So if we see the business world example, Japan and Germany, they always go for the competitiveness and also achievement and success. So we can see the masculinity within that culture. And femininity is most probably available in Sweden and Netherlands. And this kind of culture emphasizes caring, cooperation, and work-life balance. Okay, so this is very the success is always they are going to define it by well-being and the quality of life rather than the financial and competitive success. So that's what we call the masculinity culture and the femininity culture in business world. And then the fifth dimension we are going to talk about is time, long term and short term oriented. Okay, so always there are countries always think about the long-term orientation. So we can call it LTO. Always future-oriented. They always go for pragmatics, where they try to implement some methods how they can become achieve something, okay, in the future, and emphasis on saving and investments. And also they always open to change evolving societal norms, so we call that adaptability is there. And also short-term orientation. In short form, we call STO. Always this is focused on prioritize on traditions, heritage, historical values. So you always uh, consider about what you have now, right? You're only limited to the present focus or past focus, right? And this emphasize this society, they always go for the status quo. Always they have a very short term uh, targets to achieve, right? Always involved with their situations, and always they respect for their tradition. So and also rather than long-term benefits, they go for the very short-term benefits and targets. So the example countries like China, South Korea, these cultures have very future rewards. They always, in the workplace, employees are always encouraged to focus on the long-term goals, their career progressions and investment in personal and organizational growth. But the countries like UK and United States or the United States or UK, they are mostly focused on immediate results. Their respect for tradition, social obligations are there. So they always prioritize quarterly profits, right? Short-term financial performances over long-term strategies. The last dimension is indulgence versus resistance. Okay, so this dimension refers to these indulgent societies and uh, persistent societies. Okay, so indulgent societies encourage pleasure, leisure, and life satisfaction. They have the freedom of expression and weak social norms and optimistic outlook. And when we are going to go for the restrained societies, they have control over desires and they emphasis mostly on duty and discipline and limited leisure and fun. They have the pessimistic outlook. Okay, so indulgence is mostly prevalence in the countries like Mexico, Australia. So they always tend to fulfill their desires, enjoy their work-life balance, and they spend more time on leisure. So instead of for instance, in workplaces, employees are encouraged to take break and enjoy their personal time without guilt. Okay, so here the restraint means the countries like Russia and Egypt. This is mostly prevalent, right? So they control all the desires and impulses of the employees. So life is seen as that being more constrained to social norms, and the workplace in these countries are more serious, right? Personal gratification may be less openly expressed. Okay, so we discuss about the most prominent concept that the Hostitas six-dimensional cultural dimensions, and after that we have to learn about the explicit versus implicit communication. What do we mean by explicit and what do we mean by implicit communication? Okay, so the explicit in the word itself, it's very clear, okay, and also direct, unambiguous. So it's conveyed openly with no room for misunderstanding. So you can see these cultures within these explicit communication cultures, they are very transparencies there, okay, and always precision. Often they always use the contract agreement, job description, project timelines, and performance expectations. These are very good examples for this explicit communication. So the clarity is very important in all these aspects. Okay. Implicit means it's not direct message delivery. It's an indirect one. So meaning can be derived from context. That means the situation, tone, or body language. Okay. So this culture always prioritize politeness, respect, avoiding the direct communication, or they often use the implicit communication. So previously the explicit one, always the countries are United States, then the Germany, Switzerland, those goes under low context cultures are going under explicit communication. So, implicit communication, you can see the countries like Japan, China, Arabic countries, they always consider about this non-verbal cues are very crucial, right? So I told you, thumbs up in Islamic countries, they consider it as an insult. So they always care about these things, right? When they use the implicit communication. So as far as we have discussed about the uh, Hofstede's cultural dimension, 6 cultural dimensions, and we discuss about the difference between explicit versus implicit communication. And another thing we have to learn under culture is this is another concept, that is high context and low context cultures. So if you can see on this arrow, this side go for the low context cultures. This right side countries belongs to the high context cultures, right? So we'll see where these. So we discuss about the difference between implicit communication and explicit communication. Always high context cultures, they go for they rely on implicit communication and the nonverbal communication. And the low context cultures, they always rely on the explicit communication. And the last one we're going to discuss about that under the culture, you should have the knowledge about Trompena's model of cultural difference. Okay, so I'm not going to discuss in details, but this is the overview of it. He's going to talk about 7 dimensions. So you can see these are the 7 dimensions he has come out to talk about this cultural differences. So universalism versus particularism. So under that, going to talk about whether the culture is based on rules or standards or relationships and trust. And we discussed this one. It's an overlapping concept again here. So Trompenas again going to talk about the Hofstede's concept, 1 dimension here. So he repeats it. Individualism versus collectivism. And he talks about the neutral versus affective. This one, he's going to talk about whether the person within the culture expresses one's emotion openly or not. And the other dimension he's going to talk about is specific versus diffuse, whether the public and private life are closely linked or not. And the next one is achievement versus ascription. So under this, going to talk about whether the culture rewards according to the one's performance or to one's age, status, or gender. And here again, this one, it's time. He has categorized it under sequential versus synchronous. So under this, he's going to talk about whether the people tend to do one thing at one time or several things at once. And the last one he focuses on is inner directed versus outer directed. So under this, he's going to talk about to what extent the cultural people under that category or group control their environment, or uh, do their environment supposed to control. Okay. So we call these her concepts, right? Okay, so before we are moving on to intercultural competence, intercultural communication, it's very important to understand intercultural competence versus cross-cultural competence. So you will learn that these two are very important aspects in intercultural business communication. So as you all can see on the screen, so I have categorized the cross-cultural competence, intercultural competence under these aspects. So you can clearly understand what is the difference between cross-cultural and intercultural. Okay. Cross-cultural means to understand and navigate differences between cultures. Okay, but if you're going to talk about intercultural, that is, we are going to talk about interaction, right? How you're going to effectively interact and appropriately across the cultures. Okay, these are two different uh, terms. And under cross cultural, we are going to focus on comparing and contrasting cultures. Whereas intercultural, we always go for the interactions. Because of that, we go for the engaging and communicating with the people from different cultures. Okay, that means to have the intercultural communication, you should know good knowledge. You should have a good knowledge about cross cultural competition, competence, right? Okay, then the goal of cross-cultural competence is to understand cultural differences and their impact on behavior and communication. And also, if we go for the goal of the intercultural competence, always it goes for the relationships because here we are interacting, right? So, since we are interacting very smoothly, we build relationships. Then only we can earn trust. Okay. And the situations you can see often applied in situation where culture is compared to another. Okay. This one, intercultural competence, it's applied in situation where people from different cultures interact. Okay, interact. And approach is more analytical and theoretical in cross-cultural competence because always focusing on comparing and contrasting cultures. But here, intercultural competence always practical and applied because always it focuses on real-world interaction and communication. Most practical part is there in intercultural competence. Okay. And also, you can see the examples under cross-cultural competence where you learn about the customs, traditions, and values different cultures. Okay. And then intercultural one, you always collaborating with international teams, working as in a multinational, multicultural workplace. So in business world, it's very important to have the intercultural competence. And it's not only enough, you should have the knowledge of cross-cultural competence to successfully deal with the practical part of the communication and interaction. Okay. So you make sure these two are interconnected when we talk about the intercultural communication. So the skills and outcomes you can see on the cross-cultural competence, they emphasize cross-cultural competence. They emphasize emphasize the knowledge of cultural differences, and always it develops the cultural awareness and sensitivity since you know the differences. Then, when it comes to intercultural competence, always emphasizes skills, skill-oriented part, which is the communication, adaptability to cross-cultural interactions, and empathy. So, since we have that, so the outcome, what we can see in intercultural competence is it develops the ability to build relationships and successfully you can how you can communicate across cultures. Okay, so I hope you have a clear idea about what is cross-cultural competence and intercultural competence. We can name it as, if you name it as cross-cultural communication and intercultural communication, these are the same differences we can see, right? Okay, so uh, then we are going to focus on the importance towards the globalization, how the globalization was affected with this cross-cultural competence and intercultural competence. So Global business environments, they require the understanding of the diverse cultures, right? And having the knowledge of diverse cultures and the practicality of uh, maintaining the communication and interaction. So we that happened because of the rise of multinational organizations and the cross-border teams. So multinational organizations are the example. So you can see some organizations, they have companies located in several countries, right? So we call those a multinational organization. They are having several companies in different countries, right? So because of that, it's very important. We need cross-cultural competence and intercultural competence. Okay, so one example you can see a multinational company is Domino's Pizza if we consider. So it's this chain operates in many countries and including Sri Lanka. So depending, I mean, in country wise, they face challenges. So they're trying to uh, invent more. I mean, introduce more new items, food items to grab the attention of the uh, country's audience, right? So you can see they have polo assembler like this kind of pizza available where they are trying to get the attraction from the very village type crowd, right? So they may tend to see because this is very familiar thing for the cultural and traditional aspect. It's a food actually cultural food where we can consider the polar symbol, right? Okay, so intercultural communication in business, global business. So this is our topic, having a very wide area background about the understanding of culture and its key elements and the cultural related ideologies, concepts. So we have gone through all these aspects just to come to the understanding of this intercultural communication. So, as you can see in this picture, so there are different, their originality are different. Okay, so they have come, these individuals have come from different cultural backgrounds, right? So to have an effective communication, we need to understand each and every person's original. We have to respect their originality, and we have to have a good identify. I mean, understanding about their cultural differences. Okay, so why it's important for us to have this intercultural communication in business? So the very first thing we are going to talk about is it enhances teamwork and collaboration. So, since we are working in a multi ethnicities and with your diverse religions and diverse kind of thinking patterns, beliefs, and originalities and customs, so we have to widely open our mind, okay? And if we are going to work as a team, then we have to uh, we have to listen, actively listen, and respect individual ideas, and it promotes the collaboration. And also some most of the time we are dealing when we are not isolated, right? So we have to communicate with other countries. So because of these things we can negotiate, and sometimes we can uh, go for the conflict resolutions. So it's very important to have mediators in resolving cultural conflicts and misunderstandings, right? And also, finally, after communicating, what do we expect? We expect to build up relationships, and ultimately, we can earn the trust. So it's very important in business world also to build the relationships and communicate with them and build the relationships, and also try to build the trust in business network. Then only you can successfully run the business. Okay, so next we are going to talk about the strategies for effective cross-cultural communication. Okay, so there if we are going to have this kind of effective cross-cultural communication, so it's very important to have the cultural awareness, right? So and also we can go for a list of cultural strategies like this. So if we are dealing with several, if we are going to have the several cross-cultural analysis or differences, you have to always keep your mind open, right? You have to stop, avoid stereotypes. That means you should not say that your religion is the best and your idea is the best and your opinion. No, you have to open your mind to the others and you have to do active listening, right? And also, you have to learn. That's what we do in cross cultural competence, right? You have to learn about the cultures, what, and you have to research on the traditions, values, and the ethic that they follow. And according to that, you have to be very mindful of language, tone, and nonverbal cues. That's how we are going to adapt ourselves to the communication, right? So, and also, you have to show your active listening by showing the interest and clarify misunderstanding. And also, you must speak very clearly. You have to avoid slang and use simple terms. Why we have to do it? Because you can overcome the language barriers. And you should follow the greetings, gestures, and business customs because different cultures they have different customs. And also feedback, if possible, you have to be very open to the feedbacks, and you can learn cultural mistakes and adjust your behaviors and encourage collaborative collaborative working environment in the cultures, okay, for the fresh perspectives. We call that encourage diversity. And also you can follow international trends and societal changes, and you're globally to show that you stay globally informed about the changes which are happening in the surrounding. And also finally you have to be very patient, approach differences with curiosity. These are the cultural awareness strategies that uh, you can use uh, uh, im- improve the cultural awareness about the other cultures. Okay, so now we have talked about the cultural awareness, how you can use the strategies to improve it. Now we have to understand about the very important fact, barriers. What are the barriers we have for effective intercultural communication? Here we are going to talk about the communication and interaction. So we can see when we deal with this communication and interaction, these are the four main things what we see, right? We can have the language barriers. And also we can have misinterpretations in nonverbal cues. And then we can have the ethnocentrism and also cultural assumptions. These are the barriers we have to overcome. So first of all, we'll go into details of language barriers. So differences in languages, sometimes it can create misunderstanding, okay? Because sometimes this happens because having individual originalities, they may not be very fluent in their common language. So you can see sometimes there are accents, pronunciation, there can be terms and jargon, we mean that technical terms they use to talk about the other person may not have a clear idea about what that person is talking, and there can be cultural idioms and expressions. Sometimes the people they cannot communicate because they have lack of vocabulary, and sometimes their writing systems are different. So I'm going to show you some of the email types. The structures are different, okay? So the language you have to, depending on each country or the culture that you're dealing with, you have to get adapted to those, right? So these are the things you have to understand, the language barriers. So, for example, if we think a company based in United States, they can have the challenges communicating with the client in Japan because Japanese partners are not very fluent in English, right? So this may lead to confusion over technical terms or in emails, okay, and the presentations. So that's what we call language barriers. And the second one is non-verbal communication differences. So you have to understand some of the gestures, body languages. They are very differently used in different cultures, different countries. So we have to have a clear identification of what they like and what they do not like, because sometimes this can be very offensive. Okay, so example, you can see Western manager may interpret the direct gaze at confidence, but some Asian cultures, they prolonged eye contact, right? Can be seen very this prolonged for a long time. If you gaze at somebody else, they can consider it as kind of disrespectful, and also they may feel very uncomfortable, okay, discomfort in meetings. And the next one is ethnocentrism and stereotyping. So this is also a kind of a very strong barrier. It's really hard to overcome if one is already being with this ethnocentrism. So that person always believes that person's culture is superior than to the others. Okay, and this can also lead to biases and misunderstanding in communication. Okay, so for example, if we think a European manager may impose their own leadership style and decision-making process on a team from Africa, so they assume that the approach is universally applicable without considering local cultural preferences or hierarchical structures. So if we are going to implement something in a new culture, so first we have to do some research on that culture, and then we have to get adapted, right? We should not be very stereotyped. And the fourth aspect, cultural barrier we have is the assumptions and perceptions. So some people, they make assumption based on their own cultural norms, and it can have the inaccurate conclusion and communication breakdowns, right? So you can see that in the work environment also sometimes there can be different chaotic situations, right? So you can see the example I have given is here. US business might assume that everyone is comfortable with fast-paced work environment, but the environment in Latin American countries, they may prioritize personal relationships. So then there can be conflicts. So we have to always go for the negotiations here. Okay. And apart from all the four above, this is also very important, emotional and psychological barriers. So we have to understand each other's anxiety level and stress when we are dealing with the communication and interactions. Okay, so we have to avoid the feeling of isolation and frustration also. So always before we talk to the other person, we have to be very careful about these barriers. Okay, so we talk about the intercultural barriers, cultural barriers we have. And our next stage is we are going to talk about the four stages involved in intercultural competence. There are 4 stages. Okay, so these 4 stages can be displayed like this. Denial is the first stage, and defense is the next stage. Minimization is the third stage, and acceptance is the other change. And there are, so you can see a person who is in ethnocentrism can be go for ethno-relativism. So we need to go up to this level if you are going to intercultural, if you are going to communicate using intercultural communication, right? So first you deny it, then defense, and minimization, and you accept. At last you accept, and then you have to get adapted to that culture, and then you have to integrate it. So I'm going to talk about the first 4 stages because they are very important, because the adaptation and integrate part, soon after you have gone through these 4 stages, it automatically, the last two will get adapted to that culture, and then you integrate it, right? So in the denial stage, a person can say like this, I assume everyone thinks and act like me. So how you can move forward? How you're going to overcome this? So there you have to engage with people from diverse backgrounds. So thinking that you everyone thinks and act like me, it's not enough. You have to go into their level and see there are diverse cultural backgrounds, and you have to learn about those global traditions and languages and cultural customs. Otherwise, we will not be able to go for the global level business, uh, bis, global level business communication. Okay. Sorry. Then we have the defense stage. So in this stage, you recognize the cultural differences, but you think your culture is the very superior one. So to overcome that, you have to challenge those biases and stereotypes. Then you should have an open discussion with the people from different cultures to overcome this stage. And the third stage is minimization stage. So you think that you all are same, cultural differences don't really matter. So one example, you can think that thumbs up was very universally positive, but it can be very offensive in some cultures, right? So in this stage, minimization stage, you cannot stop from there. So then you have to overcome that. Then you are going for recognizing cultural differences, and you have to shape the experiences. Okay, shape the experiences, and you have to see the differences there and get adapt to it, right? And then learn how norms influence in communication and behavior. Fourth and final stage we are going to talk here is acceptance stage. There you come to a realization that because you have identified the differences between cultures, and you research and you have followed some of the local customs while traveling maybe, so you respect cultural differences and you are trying to learn more, so you accept and also you are more open to them, right? So then you can actively engage in cross cultural interactions, and you can advocate for diversity and inclusion in your community. So these are the steps you can, stages you can follow. Ultimately, if you follow these things, you can go for the adaptation and integration. Okay. The next diagram you can see how active listening and empathy is important in interaction. So you can see while if you have the empathy and active listening, finally you can achieve the trust and loyalty. Okay. So since we have these kind of intercultural issues and all, some of the companies purposefully or the organizations, they raise the awareness of this cultural sensitivity. They have their own training programs also within the organizations. Okay. So through that they are trying to adapt the communication style depending on the cultural norms, right? So I'm going to provide you some of the examples, uh, scenarios where we can find the business meetings and how they are going to adapt the communication style based on norms. So I will show you. You can go through these uh, and identify how the business meetings and how would they adapt to the styles on different cultural norms. I'll give each slide 3 minutes so you can go through it and understand. Okay, these are several scenarios. This is the scenario of negotiating in Japan. Let's move on to the second scenario. That's the direct feedback from Germany. So in each scenario, you have to see the scenarios of business meeting. These are examples, okay? And how the adaptations of the communication style can be based on the cultural norms, right? Let's move on to the third scenario. It's building rapport in Brazil. Okay, let's move on to the fourth scenario. It's related to decision making in United States. Uh, And the final scenario, it's a hierarchy in business meeting in China. Okay, so now we are going to talk about strategies how you can avoid cultural misunderstanding. So the key points you have to keep in your mind should be you have to use clear language since you're dealing with diverse cultural backgrounds, and then you have to ask for clarification if you do not understand, and you have to stop assumptions, right? And to do that, we can actually have the cross-cultural communication checklist, right? This is how it appears. So before you're going to have the meeting, you have to do these things, right? First, you have to see your audience. So we learned in the public speaking that and the oral reporting that lecture, that's last lecture. Before you're going to do a presentation or oral presenting, you should research your audience. So in the same way, in this cross-cultural communication and intercultural communication, you have to research the cultural norms and business ethic that you're going to deal with, right? The audience, with related to audience. And then you have to understand formal and informal communication style. Depending on the cultural norm, you may have to switch according to their preferences. And also, you may have to learn about the hierarchy and decision making preferences. And finally, before you're going to have the meeting, you have to plan for the language barriers, right? Make sure you use simple language. And if translation is needed, you have to provide that as well. And in the second phase, during the meeting also, you have to use the appropriate greetings and gestures. That's a must. And also, you can, as a second step, you can adapt to direct and indirect communication styles. Third, while you're doing the meeting, you have to listen actively and also observe the nonverbal cues and respect decision-making processes, fast versus consensus base. And after the meeting also, you have to have the post-meeting follow-up. So you can send a clear summary and key points and the next steps that you're going to do. And you can respect the time zones as for follow-ups. Okay, and then you can have build up the long-term relationships with cultural awareness. So this checklist is very important. Make sure before you're going to, if you are going to work in a multinational organization, this is very important. So since we have discussed about all these communication matters, so how the business communication can be very important in an intercultural situation context. So you can see verbal and non-verbal communication are very different in structure. So verbal communication can be direct and indirect language use. So we discuss about the implicit and explicit. You all can remember what we discussed. Okay. And non-verbal communication, there are postures, gestures, eye contact, tone, silence. These are very important. So example, if we consider how silence can be interpreted differently in various cultures. In Japan, silence can show respect, while the US silence may seem awkward, right? So, if you are going to effectively conduct business meetings in a multicultural setting, you have to adjust meeting formats for facilitating for diverse expectations, right? And it's very important you have to consider about the formality, decision making styles, and punctuality. And also, when we are going to deal with the writing, professional emails across the countries, there are some different tone, formality, and structure. So let's observe these different formalities and tone and structure. So always high context cultures may prefer less directness in emails, while low context cultures may be more explicit. So you can observe these differences in uh, the formats which I'm going to display on the screen. Okay, so this is an example for US formal business email, very direct and concise. So we call this is US style, right? So you can see the body part and there is the subject is there and then the salutation and then the body and then best regards like this. So just observe the changes where it happens within the structure. We'll move on to the next one, right? Indirect, very polite. This is how the Japanese style compared to US. Okay. Now let me show you the German style. It's structured and precise. And last one, this is a Brazilian type. I mean, style, very warm and relationship oriented. So as you have noticed in these all four types of styles of email structures, so you have to identify that they within the style itself, they have intercultural differences, right? The way how they draft their emails. So before you're going to send an email to those intercultural people, I mean communities, then you have to be make sure that you're following the correct style. Then it will have the good impact, right? What you're going to communicate. Okay, so hopefully we are coming to the end of our session where we'll finally going to talk about the negotiation and persuasion in cross-cultural context. So you have to understand that different cultures use different tactics for their negotiation and persuasion, right? For example, individualistic cultures, they always focus on direct persuasion, where the collectivists, they go for the harmony and group consensus. And the important fact that you have to understand here is the patience and flexibility. You have to get adapt and integrate into all these cross-cultural negotiations. And we have come since we have discussed about all these things, we cannot ignore the part of virtual communication. So virtual communication and there are challenges in globalized business environment. So you can see how this virtual communication differs from across the cultures, right? So their video conferencing expectations and email communication, I showed you the differences, and there are time zone challenges. You have to consider all these things. So what we have to understand is the role of technology in this intercultural communication is they are using it to bridge the cultural gaps. So using digital tools like translation apps, cultural training software, and virtual meeting, this is the way that we can see the how the technology is trying to bridge the gap between this intercultural communication. And also, sometimes there can be challenges over relying on the technology also, because misunderstandings in translation, oversimplifications, and cultural nuances are example for those challenges. Okay, so if we are going to talk about the pros and cons of this technology using intercultural communication, so first we'll talk about the advantages. Since the technology is there, we can instantly connect, right? Communicate globally in real time. And also, translation tools are available. Because of that, you can overcome the language barriers. And also, since and the other thing is we have the virtual meeting. Because of this, it enables team across cultures. Even when they are in different countries, they can be facilitated through the collaboration using these virtual meetings. And also, online resources also they help to uh, learn about different customs. That's a very important thing. And also reduce travel expenses for international businesses. So rather than traveling to another country, you can use the technology to communicate with another country, right? And all when we talk about the advantages, it's like one coin having two sides, right? Obviously, there are disadvantages. So, misinterpretation risk is the first one. So, the tone, humor, gestures may be misunderstood since you are physically not available in that place. And always having over reliance on translation too. Sometimes AI translation may lack of cultural nuances, they make errors, right? And time zone challenges are there. Scheduling across different regions can be difficult, and loss of personal connection. So lacks non-verbal cues present, which are very present in face-to-face communication. The having these non-verbal communication, it also build the confidence and trust. Okay, and the digital barriers, like not all the cultures they have the equal access to the technology. That's also a disadvantage. Okay, so I have taken all these things so you can see if you want to know more about the cultures. So Hofstede's cultures organization, you can refer to that main reference, and also beyond the culture, this Hall's 1976, what he has written about it. I have discussed all these things in my slides. And also Trompen, we discuss about the 7 dimensions. And you can find the supplementary materials, case studies on cross-cultural business communication, and you can you can have the access to the online resources, TED Talks on intercultural business challenges. You have to listen to those things, then you will overcome you will know more about these cultural communication, how you're going to build up it successfully. And there are business simulations and role play exercises we can have. And recommended readings, there are so many articles and videos, you can go for it. And so today we are going to wind up our presentation. It's about the lecture on the intercultural communication. Hope you have learned something out of it, and you in future, if when you are going to dealing with the international, multinational companies, organization, you will get benefited of this, what you have learned. Thank you.